Okay. So welcome, thanks. I'm Kate Smith. I want to say I'm not a teacher or a gardener. And I really want to say that because then, you can take everything I say with a grain of salt. If it suits you, go for it. No guilt trips here, okay? This talk is based on some of my stuff, but it's also based on the work of Joanna Macy. That's the skeleton of it. So I want to tell you who Joanna Macy is. She was a Buddhist, but she was also more known as an environmentalist. And what made her kind of my hero is when she was about 50, before that, she was a translator of Rainer Maria Rilke poetry. So you have to be a poet to translate poetry from German to English in the first place. And then when she was about 50, she went back to school and got a PhD in systems analyst or something like that. I can't remember the exact title of it, but she was interested in relationships, in systems and relationships, and particularly because of her Buddhist and environmentalist background, in how human beings fit into the world and are not separate from the world. And so her work, she wrote a lot of books. Her two most famous books are World is Lover, World is Self, and that has a real more Buddhist bent. And the other one is Act of Hope, and that is much more about how system theory can work in a normal everyday person's life. And I want to tell you about, we're going to next month have a Saturday afternoon at the 27th? 6th? Okay. It's a Saturday afternoon, and we're going to sort of celebrate the book, the Act of Hope book. We're going to have coffee and cookies or something sweet. And we're also going to, I'll bring Yopan Holly tea because I didn't bring that tonight because it's got caffeine in it. So, I'll tell you about that later. But that will be one afternoon that we will, and you can get Joanne, what's her name over there? Janet. Thank you. I wanted to call her Joanna. Janet got some books from Thrift Books or someplace of Act of Hope, which you can purchase here, or is also available on Amazon and places like that. And we will spend an afternoon talking about Act of Hope, and that is her kickoff and our kickoff to the work that reconnects. And we are hoping, we're in negotiations with a workshop facilitator, which was, Joanna Macy died last year. She was in her 90s. So she spent quite a few years doing all this stuff. But she left what she called the work that reconnects, reconnecting humans with the natural world. And that workshop is in the process of being set up. And now, so that will be sometime this fall, early in the winter. We're hoping, we're not real sure about that. But so this is the kickoff. So we have this talk, we have the book afternoon, and keep an eye out for that. And then that workshop will be in the future. So yeah, Joanna Macy. Okay, so her work is the skeleton kind of this talk, and the skeleton I used is what she called the spiral. The spiral is the way that she envisioned reconnecting with the world. It starts with gratitude, coming from gratitude, and then seeing with new eyes is the second step in the spiral. The third step in the spiral is honoring our pain for the world. And then the fourth step in the spiral is going forth. And so I'm going to try and use that as a skeleton for this talk tonight. So we're going to starting with gratitude. And what I picked for that is the Haudenosaunee Thanksgiving address from the Iroquois Nation. I heard about this from Robin Wall Kimmerer's, one of her books, But it is available on the internet. The Iroquois Nation uses this, has traditionally used this address to begin and end meetings, but they have given it to the world so it can do its work. So it's out there, you can find it. I'm gonna read it. Can y'all hear me if I do this? Because you know I can't see very well. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll try and project. There is a response kind of place there. There's you'll hear repeatedly, it says, now our minds are one. And if you want to join in at that line, and I will read the rest of it, it's kind of substantial. So if you'll just settle in and get comfy and maybe take a few deep breaths and look around and notice that you're safe. Let your nervous system notice that you're safe and you're fine. No tigers or lions or bears in here. Yeah, just settle in. And now we're going to start from gratitude. These are the words that come before all else. The people. Today we have gathered and we see that the cycles of life continue. We have been given the duty to live in balance and harmony with each other and all living things. So now we bring our minds together as one as we give greetings and thanks to each other as people. Now our minds are one. The Earth Mother. We are all thankful to our Mother, the Earth, for she gives us all that we need for life. She supports our feet as we walk about upon her. It gives us joy that she continues to care for us as she has from the beginning of time. To our Mother, we send greetings and thanks. Now our minds are one. The waters. We give thanks to all the waters of the world for quenching our thirst and providing us with strength. Water is life. We know its power in many forms: waterfalls and rain, mists and streams, rivers and oceans. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to the Spirit of water. Now our minds are one. The fish. We turn our minds to all the fish life in the water. They were instructed to cleanse and purify the water. They also gave themselves to us as food. We are grateful that we can still find pure water. So we turn now to the fish and send our greetings and thanks. Now our minds are one. The plants. Now we turn toward the vast fields of plant life. As far as the eye can see, the plants grow, working many wonders. They sustain many life forms. With our minds gathered together, we give thanks and look forward to seeing plant life for many generations to come. Now our minds are one. The food plants. With one mind, we turn to honor and thank all the food plants we harvest from the garden. Since the beginning of time, the grains, vegetables, beans, and berries have helped the people survive. Many other living things draw strength from them too. We gather all the plant foods together as one and send them a greeting of thanks. Now our minds are one. The medicine herbs. Now we turn to all the medicine herbs of the world. From the beginning, they were instructed to take away sickness. They are always waiting and ready to heal us. We are happy they are still among us. We are happy there are still among us those special few who remember how to use these plants for healing. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to the medicines and to the keepers of the medicines. Now our minds are one. The animals. We gather our minds together to send greetings and thanks to all the animal life in the world. They have many things to teach us as people. We are honored by them when they give up their lives so we may use their bodies as food for our people. We see them near our homes and in the deep forest. We are glad they are still here, and we hope that it will always be so. Now our minds are one. The trees. We now turn our thoughts to the trees. The earth has many families of trees who have their own instructions and uses. Some provide us with shelter and shade, others with fruit, beauty, and other useful things. Many people of the world use a tree as a symbol of peace and strength. With one mind, we greet and thank the tree life. Now our minds are one. The birds. We picture our minds together. We put our minds together as one and thank all the birds who move and fly about over our heads. The Creator gave them beautiful songs. Each day they remind us to enjoy and appreciate life. The eagle was chosen to be their leader. To all the birds, from the smallest to the largest, we send our joyful greetings and thanks. Now our minds are one. The four winds. We are all thankful to the powers we know as the four winds. We hear their voices in the moving air as they refresh us and purify the air we breathe. They help us to bring the change of seasons. From the four directions they come, bringing us messages and giving us strength. With one mind, we send our greetings and thanks to the four winds. Now our minds are one. Closing words. We have now arrived at the place where we end our words. Of all the things we have named, it was not our intention to leave anything out. If something was forgotten, we leave it to each individual to send such greetings and thanks in their own way. Now our minds are one. So, we start with gratitude. Now we move to a little harder part, seeing with new eyes. So this, we're ready for the first picture, Marianne. So, y'all, it's been a hobby of mine to do tarot for a few years. I'm hoping that I decided that instead of showing you pictures of flowers and trees that you might forget, we would start with some actual visual stuff that maybe might help some of these things come back. So you're getting your tarot read tonight.
Yay.
So, good. Yeah. Is it the tower?
Yeah.
I can't think, but it's
Tower
Yeah, tower
upside
is
down.
hanged man.
and the hanged man. Okay. So the tower is, well, that's not such a good card, you know. It means your world's falling apart, right? And that's kind of what we see every day. Chaos, confusion, bad stuff. The hanged man, he's an interesting card. He's hanging from the world tree, the tree of life, and he's hanging upside down. So he gets a new point of view. He sees something different. It's not always easy to look, and it's certainly not easy to hang upside down from a tree, right? The Tower card, there's an old story from the King Arthur legends that I wanted to tell you about a tower. And this is the story of how Merlin came into the cycle when he was a boy. There was a king, Vortigern, who was trying to build a tower, and he would build it every day, and every night it would fall. And he'd build the tower the next day, and every night it would fall. So he sought the wisdom of his soothsayers and his magicians, and they read the tea leaves and looked at the star charts and scattered the chicken bones, came back to him, and they told him that he needed the blood of a fatherless child to put in the mortar, and then his tower would stand. Well, he was king, and he didn't have any worry about getting a fatherless boy, a boy's blood. You know, that's how kingdoms are built. So he said, well, that'll be good. You know, we'll just find a fatherless boy. So all the king's horses and all the king's men went out into the world looking for a fatherless boy. The boy they found was Merlin. Merlin's mother claimed that his father was a demon. And so Merlin was taken by the king's men and taken back to the king. But of course, Merlin was magical even when he was a child. And when he saw the tower and saw the king, he convinced the king that he didn't need to have the blood of a fatherless boy, that his problem was that there were two dragons under the tower who were fighting. And that all the king needed to do was let the dragons loose. In the original story, the dragons fought until they were a red dragon and a white dragon, and they fought a battle until one of the dragons won. If we think about our modern world, the two dragons that are underlying our tower of civilization, and the illusions we have, there are our energy use and our land use. And we can't have one of those dragons kill the other because we need them both. So we have to, it's Game of Thrones time. We gotta ride the dragons. So we're gonna learn to ride the dragons. I listened to Bill McKibben the other day, and we're not gonna talk about energy use much, but he pointed out that we have been burning stuff since we lived in caves to keep ourselves warm and to cook our food. And it seems like it's slow, but it is remarkable that we are not burning stuff to do that anymore. California is now producing almost all of its energy with solar power. When I go and visit my family in the Midwest, wind power everywhere. Farmers can put windmills up and they make money that way. And they can still use the land around and underneath it. And Australia is now providing free energy to the citizens of Australia for a few hours every day, trying to encourage them to run their dishwashers and charge their phones in the middle of the day when there's a lot of solar power. But they have free energy all the time, or during that time, and they have solar energy all the time, and they have so much it's free. China is building out solar energy. So this talk is not about energy, but I just want to say that dragon, we have been fighting that dragon and we can't give up, but that dragon's in pretty good shape. We still, well, not pretty good shape, but you know what I mean. But we have land use problems. We have biodiversity problems, and we have to rethink the way we relate to our land. And the joy of this, the good part of this, is this actually something that we have control over. Energy use, we haven't had a lot of control over. We maybe through our government, but that's difficult. But land use, we really can do something about it, and it feels good to be able to do something. So I want to tell you a story now about this is the start of how my point of view started changing when I was little. I've told most of you know I came from North Dakota, but I haven't given you much more detail about that. But I want to tell you kind of how I grew up. When I was, up until the time between second and third grade, I lived in a little town of 100 people in North Dakota, and it was 25 miles to the next town. So that town was 6 blocks square, and it was surrounded by prairie. And I'm not kidding you. This sounds kind of weird, and it sounds like a little house on the prairie, but it really was. And my dad, he was kind of a hippie before hippies weren't cool. This is like the early 60s, late 50s, early 60s. And he had this idea that's, I guess it's more like homesteading now. He wanted to have a garden. We had chickens. We had one cow. Her name was Lulabelle, and she was a Holstein, one of those black and white cows. And my uncle had a farm about 10 miles south of Deering, and he had a dairy herd of Holstein cows, about 20. And they all had pretty names like that. There was Clarabelle and Daisy Belle and Bossy Belle. I can't remember all of them, but and they also had a bigger garden than ours, a lot more chickens than us, and he also had grain crops. That barn is still there. It's the iconic, hip roof barn, the big red barn. It still sits there, and it's it's still in our family, and it's just really, this is really, I'm giving you a real pastoral picture here now, but it was really cool, and this is really true. So he had these 20 cows, and let me tell you how it works with dairy cows. So they're usually inseminated, and then there's a 9-month gestation period. When the calf is born, the calf is taken away from them, and then they give milk for about 10 months, and then they rest for about 2 months, and then they're re-inseminated. So at any one time, part of the herd is pregnant, part of the herd is giving milk, and part of the herd is resting. And the farmer works through that. Cows have to be milked twice a day. My Uncle Dick's cows, they would wander out into the field. They could go into the barn or out to the field however they wanted to. And there would be a lead cow. She literally had a bell on her neck, okay? And when she thought it was time to be milked, she just went back to the barn, and they all followed her back to the barn and met my cousin Tom and my Uncle Dick, and they milked them. They had to be there 365 days a year. They had to milk those cows. And it still sounds very pastoral though, doesn't it? And I'm leaving out the cow shit, okay? So you might be wondering about that calf. When our little Belle was inseminated, she was inseminated when Uncle Dick's herd was inseminated, and they used Black Angus, so we had a little half Black Angus bull calf was born, we called Sparky, and we fed him with a bottle for a while, and he had to have a ring in his nose because he was a bull, but eventually he would be castrated and turned into a steer because bulls are not very well managed. And then he got too big for our farm, and Dad said, he's got to go to Uncle Dick's farm now. And he went out to Uncle Dick's farm. So we would go out to Uncle Dick's farm, and we would see this herd of black cows. And we would say, which one's Sparky? And Dad would point and say, that one, don't you know? Can't you tell? Of course, we'd already eaten Sparky. But we were too little to be told that. So it was kind of shocking, the end of illusions, when I found out that Sparky was my hamburger. But I kind of got over it. And I think it's because, well, it was just part of our life. It was just sort of a matter-of-fact thing. And after all, cows don't live in the wild. The ancestor of cows has been extinct since about the 1300s in Europe. And so this is a cow's life. And it's not so bad hanging out in the field. Even Sparky, he got to live a year or two hanging out in the field. They get fed in the winter. So the second break of illusion the first was when I found out that we were eating Sparky. And the second break of illusion was finding out that actually none of that picture that I showed you, and that's probably on the side of your milk bottle, is what's happening right now. So in the early 20th century, dairy farms began to be very strongly regulated. So my uncle's dairy farm actually was a grade B or C dairy farm. It wasn't milk for human consumption. Dairy farms that are for human consumption, those cows are in a very sterile environment. They never leave the barn. Unless you buy grass milk. You can buy grass milk and pay a lot more for it. but otherwise they never leave the barn. And the calves are sold into the beef industry, of course, and that industry is very hard on the animals and hard on the environment. And there's been a lot of talk about cow farts and how, cow farts and methane in the air. But in fact, the real problem with beef in the environment is that they have to be fed in the winter. And they usually are fed with alfalfa, which is grown, it's highly water intensive and it's often grown in the West. So it takes a lot of water to grow alfalfa. And you can hay. Farmers would cut swath hay and feed cattle, but again, that's a lot of work. And what's been happening since Roundup came along is that farmers figured out that they could round up the ditches and on their land and all of the land in between and grow grass, which still met the standards that were set for farming, because that land was still held in growing grass, but then they would cut that grass. But now they have a monoculture of grass, and they don't really care what kind of grass it is. A lot of it's invasive grass in the Great Plains now, not the deep prairie grass that is a good carbon sink. So beef is kind of an environmental disaster, really. But it is what human beings have eaten for a long time. And you might be thinking now, well, okay, I could be a vegan, and let me tell you about that, okay? So you may, probably, has anybody ever heard of Norman Borlaug? Norman Borlaug? No? Well, he's kind of wonderful, actually. He has probably saved more lives than any other human being on Earth. Because he developed a strain of wheat in the 1940s and 1950s that was resistant to black stem rust. And it also was very high yielding. It increased the bushels per acre. At that time, there was a real problem with black stem rust, and Mexico was worried about famine. And he developed this wheat, and then it was adopted in Asia too. And it's thought, at the time in the late 60s, we thought that there was going to be a population bomb and a famine, but we have been feeding people on this kind of wheat, this special wheat that Norman Borlaug developed since the early 1960s, when it became commercial. And truly, he has saved a lot of lives. He won the Nobel Prize. He's a wonderful man. But by the time he died in 2009, he was a little concerned about what was going on, because these strains of wheat were so specialized, corporations got involved. They trademarked the seeds. Farmers couldn't trade seeds anymore. They had to buy the seed from the corporation. The wheat requires a lot of fertilizer and a lot of herbicides and a lot of pesticides in order to keep it high yielding. And we have gotten down to four grains in the whole world that are the basis of our food supply: rice, corn, wheat, and soybeans. And you may know now that with the Strait of Hormuz closed, fertilizer is going to be scarce. So we have a very, very rickety agricultural system based on these grains. I'm not going to go into produce or anything, but my point of this is that, being vegan isn't exactly, maybe not the solution either. And And, you know, you might be thinking now, well, I'll go organic. Well, how first world of you? Because, you know, most of the world needs to have access to food, you know. So our farmers are caught, I kind of caught in a dilemma. The food bill, the agriculture bill, which I'm sure you all know about, you know what's in it, right? It was developed in the 1930s during the Dust Bowl, before the Green Revolution that Norman Borlaug started, before the development of GMOs. GMOs are the crop that goes with Roundup, and there are other chemicals that go with it, but I'm going to describe Roundup Ready corn to you because I had a case like it early in its career, in my career. Roundup Ready corn is a corn that has been genetically modified so that Roundup won't kill it. So you can spray your field, your cornfield, with Roundup, and Roundup will kill everything else. It will kill the microbes in the soil. It will kill all the weeds and everything else. It won't kill that corn. And you can imagine that is really, really advantageous for farmers. And farmers really, they're kind of stuck with this kind of system. I mean, we can point to the farmers and say, oh, terrible farmers, what they're doing, but you know, they're just trying to make a living, and the agricultural system is pretty rough. Okay. So I hope you feel bad now.
Oh, we do.
This is the second step of the spiral, and this is the one you usually get in the environmental talk, you know? Oh, the whole thing's going to hell in a handbasket, right? The second step of the spiral is seeing with clear eyes, right? Getting a new point of view, actually looking at and keeping your eyes open. Let's take a deep breath and draw some more cards. Next card, Marian.
Oops. Okay.
It's the, let's see, I drew them ahead of you.
I got it.
Ahead of time for you guys.
The guy with the swords.
So we got the 4 swords, and we got the 9 of pentacles. Okay. The 4 swords is a knight resting. This is the idea of sanctuary in European civilization. Let me make sure I don't skip anything in this part. Okay, I want to go back a little bit before I talk about these 2 cards. We could take the point of view like Ram Dass, and we are accidental gods, right? We could take a God's eye point of view and look at this whole situation and say, this is just impermanence. This is just, everything's perfect the way it is. The world is going to be taken over by insects, ticks probably. We could do that.
Mosquitoes.
And in truth, this is the 6th mass extinction. There have been 5 extinctions before. And Joanna Macy points out that the difference this time is that we're causing it. And that's actually good news. And the good news is that we care. But we're not the meteor, right, slamming into the Gulf of Mexico. We're not the volcano, blowing up Pompeii. We care about what's happening. And we love the world. We love what's going on. So that's our strength, and that's the thing that's going to make a difference. We have to keep ourselves going. We can't collapse. We can't give up. But we have to also accept that it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be rough. So the word courage, I just wanted to point out here, I like words, and the word courage here comes from the French word cœur, which means heart. So we just gotta protect our hearts. Okay. So the first card, the Four of Swords, is one way and that we can protect our hearts. We can withdraw behind walls. We can retreat. We can close ourselves off and shut down. And you know what? We might need to do that sometime. The idea of sanctuary is important for people and for animals. Animals need sanctuaries and people need sanctuaries, and sometimes we just need to say no, turn off the news. I'm not gonna listen anymore. Have a cup of tea, read a book, whatever, okay? But we have to take care of that. And we can't make that our permanent state of being, though. We can't constantly stay in those walls. This idea is called tenemos from the Greek. It means cut off. You cut off from the ordinary world so that you can interact and have some kind of interaction with the divine. So let's talk about the Nine of Pentacles. This is the idea of sacred grove. Sacred groves were places also where you could connect with the divine, but it wasn't cut off. It wasn't, there weren't walls. They're just edges. It's a liminal space, an in-between space. These are cultivated spaces, sacred groves. And they're in all kinds of, in Greek mythology, in Buddhism, there's Vulture Peak, and there's Deer Park, there's Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree. In Greek mythology, you hear about sacred groves. In Norse mythology, there's Yggdrasil, the ash tree. In Celtic and British mythology, there were oak groves. This is the idea of meeting the divine and meeting the divine in the world. And it is a liminal space, and that is kind of the idea that I'm kind of trying to promote here, is that we need these kind of spaces also, and we need to be able to meet the world here and in a place that's beautiful, in a place where we feel safe, but where we can actually be in touch with the world. I am a forest bathing guide, and one of the things that was kind of disappointing about forest bathing, and it was kind of niggling me, but I couldn't quite figure it out until I read a book by Linda Lynn Hopp. It was called Rooted. And she said in there that forest bathing was like everything else human beings do with the land there. It's an extractive thing. And I was kind of upset about it, and it kind of chewed on it for a while, but I realized that that's actually right, and that's really what kind of, people would come to a forest bathing and they wanted to go out into some kind of pristine nature, and they wanted to, it's like going to the theater and being entertained, right? And then they go home and they go back to their normal lives, and they don't really integrate that into their life. They don't, it's like, it's just a thing. And we actually aren't doing very well in wilderness. I heard about a lady being eaten by an alligator this spring, and there was a guy who got beat up by a buffalo. I mean, we don't have any kind of real good interaction with nature. And so I want you to kind of think about the idea of how you might, in an everyday sort of way, get in touch with nature. I used to think about forest bathing as sort of like throwing a party where you could meet You know, you go to a party and you meet people, and then you don't go walk away and never talk to them again. You kind of meet somebody interesting, and like, you know, maybe you get interested in birds, or maybe you get interested in wildflowers, or maybe, you know, you go fishing, or, you know, something sparks in your life, and then that you take out into the world. But you might think that the world is too much with you in a sacred space. As I said, it is a liminal space. And I wanted to offer you a couple of ideas also from some of our religious traditions, our wisdom traditions. One is the idea of the Bodhisattva. And the Bodhisattva in Buddhism is somebody who doesn't shut themselves off from the world. And Thich Nhat Hanh, I like the way he puts it, he said, we need to listen to the world, to the earth crying. And this idea of actually feeling like the earth is a being and that it is in distress is something that I think is really helpful. However you can get to that point. In Europe, it was in the Renaissance time, the idea was the anima mundi, the soul of the world. And you could feel the soul of the world. And if you think about that, you go out and you see a mother orca whose baby has died and she's carrying her, you know, you probably heard of that a few years ago. The orca carried her baby around for a couple of weeks, and she was on the news, and everybody, she couldn't let go, she was grieving. Or you see a wildfire, or a clear cut, or what you see, and you feel sad, and you think it almost feels overwhelming. But that's only if you think that feeling is just inside me, that's just me being sad. But if you think that the world is sad, the world is also there. It's not you alone being sad. You're supported and you're in community with that feeling. So I just throw that out to you. Forest bathing, we kind of try and promote good feelings, you know, connecting feelings, but it also helps with these rough feelings to actually allow the world's sadness to get in and touch you. Ready? More cards? Okay. So we have the Fool and the Magician. The Fool is an interesting card in tarot because it's actually the joke of the tarot is that it's about the fool's journey as opposed to the hero's journey. Tarot is, the joke is that, you know, divination, that's for suckers, nobody knows the future, right? But we can look really closely at what's going on now, and try to move with the world and kind of figure out how we're going. And that's the fool's journey. The fool doesn't know what's going on. In a lot of cultures, including Europe, the fool is actually thought better of than the hero. If you think about the hero tales, Jason and the Argonauts, or Odysseus, or Siegfried and the dragon, these are terrible people who do terrible things and live terrible lives. They're actually cautionary tales. The fool is like the harlequin who speaks truth to power, like the jester in King Lear. And not just in that culture, in Native American cultures, there's the hohoka, the sacred clown, the trickster in a lot of the stories, kind of makes a mess and makes chaos, but usually things turn out okay and maybe better than before. So this fool, you might notice that he's about to take a leap of faith, and he's enjoying himself, and he's not too worried about the future. This reminds me of the Wendell Berry poem, and I don't know if I can say the whole thing. I'll give it a try though. Maybe some of you can help me. I can't. Never mind. I'm not going to try it. Maybe I'll come up with it later. So the fool is actually somebody that we want to kind of emulate. The magician's a little bit of a trickier figure, and you'll notice the fool is a 0 and the magician's a 1. So he's like the fool on his journey, but now he's got a few tools. He's got his cup and his wand and his sword and what's the other one? Pentacle, money, or material things. And he's got some skills because he's a magician. He's joining heaven and earth. He's got his ideas, his spark of ideas, but he's also bringing them down to earth. The magician, though, he's kind of an edgy figure because when you're starting to try and exert control, right? You're starting to try to control things and not just go with the flow like the fool. Now you can get a little bit dangerous. You can make some mistakes. So in our talk now, we're going to move into the suburban yard, and the fool I'm calling the dilettante, and the magician is the gardener, okay? So, and it is no shame to be a dilettante. I'm going to read you the dictionary definition of a dilettante. A person who explores an art, science, or topic in a casual or superficial way without true commitment, deep knowledge, or professional skill. Does that sound like you? It sounds like me. It sounds like the average person in possession of a yard, who only knows, what their daddy did, which is, mow the lawn and clip a hedge and, plant some tulips, maybe, if you're lucky. There are a lot of people who do not like to garden, and they don't have the time for it or the inclination. And that's the dilettante, and that is the person that really can do a lot of good, just by not trying to be a magician. So let me make sure. Okay, so I want to talk about, first of all, some things that you can do that are really, really simple, but really make a big difference. One thing is taking care of birds is like keeping your cats indoors. Cats are predators. That's a no-brainer and pretty easy. You can, if you have sliding glass doors or panes, you can mark those. That actually kills a lot of birds. If you have one at your office, you can mark those, those reflector things that keep the birds from running into them. And they will. We had a little bluebird at Turkey Creek who, one of the ladies parked her car next to the bluebird house, and he had taken it up, and he had decided that was his, and he was waiting for a female to come along, and he was working on that, but he saw his reflection in the window of that car, and he was just diving into that window over and over and over again because he thought he was seeing another bird. And she got up and moved her car, and we moved her car away. So hopefully he didn't damage himself too much, but those are really, really ways that you can help, is just being aware that there are other creatures in the environment that are interacting with your environment, and just a few tweaks like that. Litter. I grew up in Lady Bird Johnson days, I'm that old, and I would never have thought of throwing out a plastic bottle or something like that, but I used to think it was just fine to throw out an apple core. I thought, this is biodegradable, that'll be fine. Well, I found out since I started working with the naturalist at Ruffner is that is the number one cause of injury to raptors. Food alongside the road attracts rodents, and rodents attracts hawks and owls. Vultures and carrion eaters like crows, they are adapted to cars, and they'll, a car comes down the road, they'll get up and move. But raptors, they focus on that mouse and they just dive for it. So we have a hawk there now, Kitty Hawk. She is a red-tailed hawk. She's juvenile, and she was hit by a car hunting alongside the road. She will never fly. She's going to be in our. So don't litter. See, that's easy, right? Mm-hmm. Take your trash, maybe compost it. Okay, yellow porch lights. Barney and Andy sit on the porch, and Mayberry, they had a yellow porch light. And that sounds like such a simple thing, but moths and night-flying insects like moths, they navigate by having the moon on their back, right? The light from the moon on their back. And so they get confused by the light and they'll start going around and they'll do that death spiral. It makes it a lot nicer to sit outside too if you have a yellow light, because you don't have the insects attracted to your porch light.
The yellow light is good.
Pardon?
The yellow light's good.
I'm sorry, you got it.
The yellow light is good.
Yeah, yellow light.
So switch
Yellow
out the
light,
white for
they
yellow.
don't, the yellow bug lights, they used to sell them when we were kids. Insects are, you will see that, now I'm gonna talk about native plants, that really what you're trying to grow is insects. And our native Birmingham entomologist, E.O. Wilson, who wrote a lot of books, and he was a Harvard entomologist, and he was from Birmingham. He called insects the little engines that run the world, and they are. And our insect populations are crashing. When I was a kid and driving in North Dakota, you drive down the road and your windshield would just smashed with insects. Maybe some of you aren't even old enough to remember that, but it doesn't happen anymore. Insects are dying, and it's causing a lot of problems. Like I had a problem with ticks this summer. We had so many ticks, and ticks are getting really thick. They don't seem to be bothered by a lot of the things that we're doing, and a lot of the other critters that eat them, the other insects, the bats, possums eat ticks. There are not enough of them, and the ticks the tick population is exploding.
I've had a bunch of them this year.
Yeah, I had a bunch of them too. And we actually we have dogs that go in and out of our house. They have a dog door, and they get, what is that treatment you give your dog to keep the ticks?
It's a little pill you can use.
Yeah, the pill.
Yeah.
Rich gives them the pill. So they were bringing ticks in, and the ticks wouldn't stay on them. They were getting on Rich and me. We have woods, and we ended up, I spent some time, and this is a magician thing, but we couldn't have ticks in our house. There are places where there shouldn't be critters, and I don't want ticks in my house,
Right.
or bats or mice or anything else. So I ended up buying some stuff called cedarside, which promised me on the label that it repelled, not killed. They probably moved over to Mr. Elliott's house or cooked where they
Okay.
But at least, but I did my best. Maybe some of them got into my yard attaches to a power line thing, so hopefully and I'm told by a guy that I know that used to work at Alabama Power that they do have to manage those power line right-of-ways a little more ecologically friendly. They can't just kill everything. So anyway, so let's see, yellow porch light. Okay, so just those things, not too much. But now let's talk about the lawn. Okay, if you own a lawn, and I got a lawn when I bought my house, and a lot of mortgage companies won't even give you a mortgage if you don't have a lawn around your house. It's really weird, but it's there are weird laws and things that govern this. The man that we bought our house from was Bill. He scraped all the topsoil off of our land and sold it and bought Bermuda grass sod. Bermuda grass is an invasive grass, and put it down under the trees, and it needs full sun, so it died. At the time, we were traveling a lot in Arizona. I have a sister in Arizona, and they xeriscape out there. And they just have a lawn that's gravel, and, because you can't water things out there. Water is difficult to come by. You can't water your lawn. And so they would have gravel or, maybe one cactus, a Zen garden looking thing. And so we had kind of gotten used to that. So we just started doing what we call the natural area. We have a big natural area. But our neighbors have lawns, and they mow, spray pesticides, spray herbicides. So that's the first thing. You can do is stop, even if you have to mow, if your HOA or your neighborhood requires you to mow that lawn, you could stop putting pesticide and herbicide and fungicide on that lawn. And just doing that, you're gonna grow a bunch of weeds. You can mow the weeds, you're not gonna have that monoculture, beautiful golf course lawn. I guess I wanna tell you about the history of lawns, because it's kind of interesting. We all think that lawns, everybody has a lawn, right? But in fact, the idea of a lawn was invented. I tell this story with dandelions, because dandelions were brought over by early colonists. It was one of the first plants brought over. It has been a staple in Eurasia since caveman times. Is a medicine and as food. All parts of dandelion are edible, the roots, the flower, the leaves, and it's got a lot of antioxidants. The leaves are not tasty once it flowers, so you have to be able to recognize the leaves before the flower comes out. But they're pretty easy, pretty distinctive once you figure it out. And it was valuable. It was valuable, and it was brought over deliberately by European colonists because they wanted dandelions, and they had no idea or concept or plan for a lawn. The idea didn't exist at that time. And it is now on every continent. Dandelions are now on every continent in the world. So the idea of the lawn was invented by British and French aristocracy. It was a sign of wealth. You could have this big piece of land that you didn't have to use for agriculture. You didn't have to use for pasture. You could have somebody take care of it. You could have a servant to take care of it. All these things were signs of wealth. And so that's where the idea of lawn came about. And it was brought to this continent by people like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. They had lawns on their plantations. It was kind of a thing that went along with it. But the average Joe didn't have a lawn. They might have if they did have a little plot of land, they'd probably use it for a garden or chickens. They didn't have a lawn. Then in about, I think 1939, Toro invented the gas lawnmower, and then in the 50s, the suburbs came along, and this is the idea, and this is where the idea of the lawn came about. So everybody could have a lawn all of a sudden. George Washington was a big landowner, and he also was a land surveyor, you may know. And he had surveyed land west of the Appalachian Mountains before the Revolutionary War when he was a young man. And there were a lot of people on the eastern seaboard who wanted to develop land in Ohio and Kentucky. And the British wouldn't allow it because they had made treaties with the Native Americans, and they didn't want the colonies to extend over the Appalachian Mountains. After the Revolutionary War, one of the first things that would happen was that in order to pay war debts, the land west of the Appalachians was sold and developed to land developers, and then people began moving in, and there were actually wars with Native Americans. You may have heard of Tecumseh, I think was his name. There were fights over treaty rights in the Ohio Valley and Kentucky during that time, and that was land that was developed. And George Washington was a big developer. I don't think Thomas Jefferson had money to do it. Anyway, okay, so what can you do about your lawn then? If you have a lawn, well, first stop spraying it with all that junk, okay? Pesticides, the bottle will say kills mosquitoes or something like that. That's not all it kills. They really can't. They are not really that technologically advanced that they can kill just mosquitoes. It kills everything. It kills all, but it'll kill mosquitoes. That's what the label says, but it'll also kill everything. So don't spray pesticides. There are some, mosquitoes are a problem, and I think they're the most dangerous animal that's ever lived on Earth. They've killed more people than any other animal. And they are a big problem, and I'm not saying that there aren't places that they shouldn't be sprayed, that shouldn't be sprayed, but you can control mosquitoes in your little domain, in your little kingdom, without mass spraying for insects. There are these mosquito dunks you can put in your bird bath. There was a while that people in my circle were talking about something called a mosquito bucket. I'm told to be a little wary of that, because what would happen is people would, and I'm not going to tell you how to make that, but you can look it up if you're interested. But they work, but you have to use them all season, and you have to change them every month. You can't let the bucket sit there all season. It will eventually turn into something that makes mosquitoes instead of getting rid of them. But you can use mosquito dunks like in your bird baths, or if you have a cattle trough or something like that. It will not harm the animals. And get rid of standing water. You can use fans. Mosquitoes will not, if you just blow a fan on you, mosquito won't land on you. I use DEET when I'm at Turkey Creek. I don't like it. It stinks, but it's that theory of, instead of trying to cover the world with leather, put on a pair of shoes, right? So spray DEET on myself when I'm really going to be. I also have some botanical, off botanical, which is probably not very botanical, but it works pretty well, and it doesn't stink like DEET. And so if I think I'm going to go out and sit on the porch and drink my coffee or something like that, I might keep that if the mosquitoes use that if the mosquitoes are bad, and then I don't feel like I have to go and have a shower before I do something else. And so I kind of have a pharmacy of personal bug sprays. But yeah, so avoiding pesticides and fungicides, and if you do that, you can eat your lawn if you're not putting all that junk on it. A lot of those plants that we were talking about that grow in your lawn, whether they're invasive or not, chickweed is edible, dandelions are edible, and if you're not spraying all that junk on it, you can eat them. And I listened to a microbiologist from Stanford, and I can't remember his name, so apologize, but he was talking about managing your microbiome, and one of the things that has discouraged me about foraging is the idea of picking all that stuff and making a salad. It would take forever to pick, a bunch of dandelion greens to make a salad. But actually, if your microbiome needs between 30 and 40 different plants a day, but you don't need a lot, it's a microbiome, right? So, you eat a whole grain bread, or, you eat one of those multi-grain breads. You got several grains in there, you got some coffee, you got some tea, eat a dandelion leaf. That's all you need. And you're getting one of your 30 or 40 plants a day for your microbiome. So I do want to talk about, we talked about a little bit about NOMO and LOMO. I think one of the poster childs for this was, I think last year, maybe they talked about no mow May, which was sort of the idea was not to mow for 4 weeks, let your lawn get that high and then mow it. A lot of things would grow in there, and as I said when we were talking earlier, those little any flower will be a pollen source for insects, and so you don't have to plant anything fancy or special. You're just providing pollen sources. Not always high quality pollen, but some of it, and you might get some natives. Flea veins will grow in a lawn that's not mowed. My dream suburban landscape, my dream suburban lawn is where you get together with your neighbors and like get 4 neighbors, and Joe mows on week 1, and then George mows on week 2, and then Susie mows on week 3, and then Mary mows on week 4, and then you go back and Joe mows again, and so the pollinators can move from one lawn to another. Because the problem with no mow May is you mow that pollinators need to eat more than 1 month a year. So they need pollen sources all the time. So if you can make a deal with your neighbors or talk to your neighbors about, hey, how about if I mow my lawn, and then you mow, that would be my dream, my utopia of suburbia lawns. You don't have to get rid of that lawn. You can get rid of that lawn. And the last thing I'll talk about is one way to get rid of your lawn, and that's leave the leaves. Leaves will kill your grass, right? A lot of insects make nests in the ground, or they use leaf cover to make nests, and the poster child for this is fireflies. Fireflies make their nests in leaf cover. So if you want fireflies, I like fireflies. They're a beetle and they grow in the ground. Just leave your leaves. You don't have to leave them all over your lawn, but sweep them into an inconspicuous corner somewhere. Don't mulch them, because then you're chopping up the egg cases or the larval cases, but just sweep them into a corner and let them sit there. If you do that a few years, you'll end up with a compost and with a bed. Then you can plant that bed and then move to another corner. But, okay, so that's the dilettante. I think I've covered everything about the dilettante. I guess I do want to talk a little bit about invasives. If you know you have an invasive in your yard, and so let me tell you a little bit about invasives. Alabama does not stop invasives from being sold. So you can go down to Lowe's and buy a Chinese privet. I'm going to use that as my poster child for invasives because it's the one I hate the most, but yours, your favorite one. But you can go to Lowe's and buy a Chinese privet, or you can order one online from Fast Growing Trees. Chinese privet it blooms for 2 weeks in the spring and provides pollen. It has beautiful evergreen leaves that are never chewed on by a caterpillar or deer, because nothing will eat it. Birds like the berries that come up in the fall, and that's how it spreads around, and it will escape your yard. Now, some invasives like English ivy, they'll grow like Godzilla in your yard, but they won't leave your yard. But some of them go out in the world, mimosa, Chinese privet, kudzu, so those berries, the birds will eat the berries, and then, and then wherever they poop, you get another little Chinese privet, and Chinese privet is very, very, it grows very easily. So I have 2 neighbors who have Chinese privet hedges, and I will never, ever not have Chinese privet in my yard. I have to constantly, every January I go out, it's evergreen, so I can find it easily in the brush, and I kill Chinese privet. And I told you all about using the dauber, and this is when I do use Roundup, but I don't spray Roundup on the soil around it, spray it because that kills all the microbes around it in the soil. The soil is dead wherever you spray Roundup, but I do use Roundup and a dauber and daub that cut edge of the privet. I asked around and everybody that I know at Turkey Creek who knows what they're talking about has told me that Roundup is the only thing that they found that will kill privet. Okay, so why is it so terrible? I just told you that it provides pollen and it provides berries for birds. And actually, honeybee people love Chinese privet. They'll bring their what are those things called? Their hives, yeah, in and let the bees work on the privet when it's blooming. But the thing is that those bees, they can take it to another field where something else is blooming. In the meantime, Chinese privet has taken over that whole area and there's nothing else blooming. So you have 2 weeks of bloom and then nothing else. So if you have pollinators there who are eating, again, they need to eat more than 2 weeks a year. So privet is not a great pollen source. Honeybees get moved around and they are not a native bee. They are, they're developed and they work with agriculture because they do pollinate plants and they make honey. And so that's why they're a valuable, and they're a food source. Nothing wrong with honeybees. It's just that they do outcompete native bees. And so in your yard, you don't want to really provide for honeybees. The farmers need them and can take care of that. You want to provide for our native bees, and our native bees are in trouble. So let's talk about now becoming a magician. So that's invasives anyway. So stop me if I say something strange or if it's confusing, or I'm probably saying a lot of strange things anyway. So now we're at the magician. Skills, tools, ready to go, right up there. The first thing a magician needs to do is don't call any demons, right? Yeah, first do no harm. Don't plant invasives. So how do you not plant an invasive? How do you know, right? And the first thing is don't buy at Lowe's unless you really have to be in the know. That's the first place a homeowner will go who doesn't know anything about gardening, is they'll go to Lowe's, and almost everything at Lowe's is non-native, and because a lot of non-natives are easy to grow, and there can be invasives there. Alabama and most states don't prevent invasives from being sold within the state. But there are some other problems with planting wildflower seed mixes. You've seen those, right? They show you this romantic meadow of flowers. Yeah, that doesn't work. Yeah, it doesn't work at all. So one YouTube channel I wanted to mention to you all is one called Backyard Ecology. They're in Kentucky, so they're talking about southeastern plants and southeastern yards, and they're really good. But he did, one of his episodes was on wildflower seed mixes. And he had something like 26, 27, 28 seeds in that bag. Out of that bag, they all were seeds that he's in Kentucky. All of those seeds would grow in Kentucky. They were all plants that would grow in Kentucky. But only 5 were native to Kentucky. The rest were just flowers that would grow in Kentucky. And there were some from Europe, there were some from California, there were some from all over. And I told you when we were talking about lawn that those flowers are still a pollen source, and that is very true. But, and here's a but, that lawn, that no-mow lawn is much, much better than a lawn that's sprayed with a bunch of stuff and mowed, militarily every week. But it's still not the best source of pollen. And there are a lot of pollen specialists that are, particularly bees are very particular about their pollen. And they want pollen from a particular plant. Plus, like dandelion provides some pollen, but it's not very high quality, not very nutritious. It's more like them eating candy than actually eating good food, all right? So your no-mow lawn, you're not doing any harm, but now we're in magician territory, right? And so we're trying to do some good. And all of those non-native plants in that wildflower seed mix are not doing any better than you would just if you just left your lawn there. So just don't use those seed mixes. Also, ask me how I know this. I learned the hard way that a lot of native plants, they'll say, this is native to southeastern United States. Well, in the southeastern United States, there is Florida and Mobile and Birmingham and Virginia. I mean, there's a lot of different systems in there. Even if it says it's native to Alabama, we got Mobile and we got Birmingham. And one of the books I left out there, which was Wildflowers of Tennessee and the Ohio River Valley. When I first started, Miss Francis told me, one of my dear friends told me that the wildflowers that you find in Birmingham are Appalachian wildflowers, and you need that wildflower book, that one about Tennessee. Those are the wildflowers that grow here, different than Mobile. So just be aware of that. If you go to a nursery, you're probably not going to get an invasive at a nursery, but most nurseries don't specialize in natives, and even good nurseries like Petal from the Past, I bought some, I don't remember what it's called now, some bushes for shade anyway, and I put them in my backyard, and this is early on in native. They were told they were said to be native, but I found out that they're actually native in Florida, not in Alabama. They're pretty, and they're not harming anything, but they're not helping either. And I try to use my money and my time and my effort to plant something that's useful. So just kind of keep an eye on, actually that it's buying local. So the botanical garden has a plant sale in the fall and the spring, and the plants are cheaper also. And theirs is in September this year. And the Turkey Creek, Ruffner Mountain, and Red Mountain are under Jefferson County Greenways. And we also have a plant sale in fall and spring, and ours this year is in October. It's every Saturday in October from 10 to 2. And we all have not only natives, but local natives. The botanical garden has a native plant group within the larger botanical group, so you just find their native plant place. And you're buying local stock, and you're buying, and also people there who know something and help you pick something out. Okay, so let me make sure that I said everything I wanted to say. Do I want to check? Okay, so I wanted to tell you about goldenrod. And I wanted to use goldenrod as the poster child for host plants, because this is something that confused me for a while. We talk about pollinators a lot, and pollen, as I explained, is any flower produces pollen, and the bigger the flower, the more it's and trying to attract an insect. A host plant is different than a pollen plant. It is the plant that can host the larval form of that insect. So a monarch butterfly can eat pollen from any plant, but it can only lay its eggs and where it's on a milkweed, because that's all its caterpillar can eat. A monarch caterpillar needs milkweed to eat. So this has some implications for the home gardener who has an HOA, all right? Because if you think about this a minute, you plant milkweed for a monarch. The monarch lays its eggs in that plant, and now that plant has turned brown because it's winter. You can't cut that plant down because you've got caterpillar eggs in it. And you have to wait till spring when it starts to green up from the ground. The caterpillars emerge and they move to the leaves, and then they start chewing holes in your leaves, right? This disturbs some gardeners. But that's the sign of a native plant. Yeah, I can pick out a native plant even if I don't know what it is, because something's eating that leaf, you know? I found a little plant a little forb called 3-leaf mercury in my yard, and I started letting it grow because I thought it looked like mulberry weed, but I thought, something's eating it. And so I looked it up, and it's actually called Virginia 3-leaf mercury. You can't buy it in a nursery, it's just a weed, but it's not really, it's a native, it pops up all over. But I have I live more in the country, so I can let stuff like that just do. But that might pop up in your lawn, and, you know, so it certainly is that kind of a plant. Your no-mow lawn.
I have a ton of it.
You have a ton of it? I love that stuff, I know. And it does eventually mass. You mean, you have to be a little patient with it, but it turns into sort of a ground cover, and it's kind of attractive. And I kind of like holy leaves now. I kind of
don't
like
like to be that patient. I think a lot.
yeah, you know. But one thing I found out about, like, chickweed, I had a problem with chickweed this summer, and chickweed is invasive. I don't know if it's invasive, it's edible, but it's not native. But I've learned not to take stuff up unless I have something to put in its place, because bare ground, not good, you know. And that chickweed, you know, it was holding the ground, and I didn't have anything to put there, so I just left it. And so, you know, 3-leaf mercury, and, you know, you get rid of it if you want to, but yeah. So anyway, so you have this brown stalk. That's not great for, probably your HOA is not gonna be real happy about that. I thought about there's a couple ways you can get around this. One is to plant in a far inconspicuous corner where, another is to plant in the pot. And then when it turns brown, just move the pot to an inconspicuous corner, and then when it greens up, move the pot back out. And the National Wildlife Federation has on their website all kinds of native plants that will grow in pots, a list of native plants that will grow in pots. Let's see, so, and the third thing is woody plants, because actually trees and shrubs are flowering plants also. They, so I wanna move into the trees and shrubs, and we'll stay on the magician though. So, for the tree, I picked oak because, it's kind of a rock star in the tree world. And you're probably going, oak, ugly, big, takes too long. There's some kind of, people don't like oaks around here, I don't know why. But oaks can live about 900 years. It takes them about 300 years to get full size, and then they kind of sit there for about 300 years, and then it takes them about 300 years to decline and die. They get huge around, but they grow, they're like people, they get tall and skinny first, and then they start growing out. So they can, you'll have a shade tree, in like 20 years. But you also could think you're planning for the future. But it is a huge big deal. And not everybody has room for a tree in their yard. But I really, getting back to that forest bathing thing and making a relationship, I really recommend that you make friends with a tree. You know, maybe when you pass on your walk, when you're walking your dog every day, just stop and say hello to that tree, watch it change its seasons, just, you know, or maybe one in a park that you know. If you're lucky enough to have a tree already in your yard, or if you have room to plant a tree, you know, there are others besides oak, but there are other native plants besides oak, but I picked oak because it does have some magical properties. So, I mentioned, that it was used in Celtic and British, it was thought of in Celtic and British mythology and folklore as the axis mundi, the center, the world center. Yggdrasil in Norse mythology is an ash tree, but in Celtic and British mythology, it's an oak tree. The word in Gaelic for oak is dúr, D-U-I-R, I'm sure I'm not saying that right, but it means door, and it was thought, it was kind of like a port key to the spirit world. And it has this, it's in the same word family as druid, and they're related, and oaks have a lot of connection to that whole mythology and spirituality. There's not a lot known about it, but they have found oaks that they're pretty sure were the center of like a sacred circle in the British Isles, and they think that's like the example of that axis mundi kind of thing. So some other lore about oaks is related to the oak king. The green man is kind of a spirit of the wild in the British Isles, and it was the oak king from winter solstice to summer solstice, and then the holly king took over from summer solstice back to winter solstice. And so if you want to make a wand or a magical staff from oak, the best time is right before summer solstice. You know, ask permission and cut yourself a magic wand. It's known to give you good strength and courage. If you put an acorn in your pocket, you might have some good luck.
Okay, this is about an hour and a half, so.
Is it too late? Is it time? Do I have to
Probably
quit?
should, you probably
say
should kind
30.
of wind up. You probably should kind of wind up.
Okay, I will stop. I wanted to tell you also about Yopan Holly, but I will, maybe some other time if you ask me if you're interested. And I will stop there. I just want to say that there is a belief that comes from, I think, from an economist in the 60s, I can't remember, a German guy, and it's called The Tragedy of the Commons. You may have heard this in economics.
Yes.
There is a female Nobel Prize winning economist, and her name is Eleanor Ostrom. She says that's a made-up story. And Gary Snyder, you may have heard about him, the poet from the 60s. He also talks about how the commons prior to the Enclosure Acts and capitalism was actually a viable way that to manage land. The idea of sharing land and working together and using land was actually part of our tradition. And this idea of the tragedy of the commons comes with capitalism and enclosure and all of our ideas. And the idea then is that you have to have some kind of top-down kind of management, somebody to tell you what to do. And it's just not true. People cooperate, people work together, and they work things out, and they always did. So I kind of skipped to the end. And sorry,
It's okay.
I kind of got it, I can talk about this all night, but
Yeah.
obviously.
I learned a lot.
You're welcome.
That was good.
Mm.
So everybody come to the book group.
Yeah, come to
We'll
the
do more
book group.
promo.
Yeah.
Active
September,
Active hope, okay.
September 26th.
September 26th, okay.
Yeah, and